I didn't know my life was already cracking apart while I was standing alone in the garage every night, breathing in the sharp scent of motor oil and hot metal, convincing myself everything was fine. For 6 months, that garage became my confessional, my hiding place, my quiet courtroom where I replayed the same question again and again. How did my husband Jason suddenly become busier than a trauma surgeon? Late nights at work, weekend conferences, endless client dinners. On paper, I was the kind of wife people admired, trusting, supportive, low drama. In reality, I was either painfully naive or exceptionally talented at ignoring the truth while my hands were buried deep inside carburetors and timing belts. Then came Thursday. I was elbow deep inside the engine of a Honda when my phone vibrated against the concrete floor. A message from Jason. Working late again, dinner with a client, don't wait up. That heart emoji didn't feel like affection. It felt like a cover-up. Because when a spouse starts adding hearts to lies, it isn't romance. It's damage control. And don't wait up. That's code. It means I'm somewhere you wouldn't approve of. I wasn't stupid. I'd seen the clues, each one small, each one easy to excuse. But together, they told a story I didn't want to hear. A drawer full of lingerie I'd never seen him wear for me. A phone that used to sit unlocked on the kitchen counter, now guarded like classified information. A sudden obsession with the gym, 4 days a week, yet he came home spotless, not a bead of sweat, not a single hair out of place. And the smell. When your husband comes home after working late, but smells like expensive women's perfume instead of motor oil or aftershave, you'd have to be deliberately blind not to question it. I could have exploded, tracked him down, blown up his phone, stormed his office like a jealous stereotype. But that's not who I am. I didn't build a profitable auto shop by acting on impulse. I play the long game. I stay calm. I observe. So instead of accusing him, I texted back, "Hope the lobster's good. Tell Brandon to double-check his investment portfolio." I didn't even know if Brandon owned stocks. But guilt has a way of recognizing itself. 3 seconds later, my phone rang. Not a text. A call. The kind people make when they realize the walls are closing in. And as I answered, calm, steady, I heard it. A man's voice in the background, asking, "What did she say?" That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. That was the moment I knew. Before everything fractured, before secrets started bleeding through the cracks, my life looked enviable. I was 34, a business owner, and married to a man most people considered a catch. Jason Martinez, confident, charismatic, sharp in a tailored blazer that looked nothing like the grease-stained overalls he used to wear when we first met. He worked in marketing, climbed fast, spoke the language of growth, branding, visibility. He knew how to sell ideas, and people loved him for it. I owned a local auto shop. It had been mine long before Jason ever entered my life. I liked machines because they were honest. If something was broken, it showed. If you fixed it right, it worked. No manipulation, no double meanings. We met 7 years ago at a backyard barbecue thrown by a mutual friend. He made a joke about how I smelled like gasoline and confidence. I laughed harder than I should have. He liked that I didn't play dumb. I liked that he looked at me like I was impressive, not intimidating. Everyone noticed the chemistry immediately. We dated fast, not reckless, but intense. Jason was attentive back then. Texts during lunch, calls just to hear my voice. 3 months in, he proposed. He knelt down in the living room of my tiny rental, hands shaking, holding a ring he'd clearly spent weeks agonizing over. I said yes, without hesitation. His parents paid for the wedding, big venue, white linens, perfect photos. I didn't care about any of that. I cared that he looked at me like I was the best decision he'd ever made. We moved into a quiet suburban house soon after. Joint accounts, shared calendars, shared goals. When his temper flared, sharp words, sudden silences, I told myself marriage meant patience. When therapy entered the picture, I showed up. Every session, every exercise, every uncomfortable conversation. From the outside, we were the golden couple, matching Halloween costumes, carefully curated Instagram posts, anniversary dinners with candlelight and captions about forever. Friends called us relationship goals. I smiled and played my part. What those pictures never showed was how, somewhere around year 4, our conversations began to shrink. Real talks were replaced with logistics, bills, groceries, schedules. The laughter disappeared first, then the intimacy. I started sleeping on the couch more nights than in our bed. Our physical connection turned into something scheduled, polite, hollow. Obligation without desire. 8 months before everything unraveled, I felt the shift clearly. Jason stopped laughing at my jokes. Not less, not at all. He'd glance at his phone when I spoke, nod without listening. When your spouse stops finding you amusing, it usually means one of two things. They're drowning emotionally, or they've already left. Jason wasn't drowning. He had energy, pep in his step, new clothes, new routines, new confidence. What he also had were more business trips, more locked door phone calls, and a habit of turning his screen away from me like I was a stranger instead of his wife. And still, I told myself stories. He's stressed. He's ambitious. This is just a phase. Because admitting the truth meant admitting my marriage was already on life support. And I wasn't ready for that yet. Not until the evidence started showing up in places I couldn't ignore. Not until trust turned into observation. Not until love turned into investigation. They say hindsight is cruel because it turns whispers into warnings. Once my suspicion took shape, I started seeing everything I had ignored. Tiny fractures that, on their own, meant nothing. Together, they told the same story over and over again. Jason became protective of his phone in a way that felt rehearsed, not casual, strategic. He never left it face up anymore. If a notification chimed, he reacted faster than instinct, flipping the screen down, clearing it, locking it. Once, I reached for it absent-mindedly to check the time. His hand shot out, quick and sharp. "I've got it," he said, too fast. The moment lingered longer than it should have. Then there were the changes in routine. Suddenly, his gym schedule was sacred. 4 days a week, non-negotiable. But he'd come home looking untouched. No sweat, no flushed skin, hair still perfect. When I teased him about it, he smiled and said, "Guess I've got good genes." I smiled back and stored the detail away. The smells came next. Jason used to come home smelling like coffee and printer ink. Sometimes takeout, sometimes stress. Now, every so often, there was something else. Soft, floral, expensive. A perfume I didn't own. I told myself it must be someone at the office. That lie lasted until the receipts started appearing. The first one was from an upscale steakhouse, a Tuesday night, 2 entrees, wine. Total, $247. No business group discount, no multiple names, just 2 people. The waiter had written on the slip, "Hope you two had a wonderful evening." I remembered that night clearly. Jason had texted, "Running late, client dinner, don't wait up." I folded the receipt and put it back where I found it, heart pounding like I just touched something dangerous. Then came the hotel receipt. Over $400. Boutique place, weekend stay. The same weekend he'd claimed he was in Chicago for a conference. I remembered driving him to the airport that morning, hugging him goodbye, waving like a supportive wife. That memory turned sour instantly. And then there was Tiffany's. A pale blue bag tucked beneath the passenger seat. Receipt inside. $850. Jason had never bought me jewelry like that. Not because he couldn't, but because whenever he asked, I always said I preferred practical gifts. Tools, appliances, things for the house. Apparently diamonds weren't frivolous when someone else was wearing them. That's when a name started echoing louder. Brandon. Jason mentioned him constantly. Brandon said this. Brandon's going through a divorce. Brandon's campaign is killing it. I'd never met him, but I recognized his texting patterns better than my own mother's. Mid-afternoon. Always when Jason was wrapping something up. Always when his phone buzzed and his expression shifted. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse. Because I knew something most people don't realize until it's too late. When infidelity is involved, the first move is often no move at all. Explosions give cheaters a script. She's paranoid. She's controlling. She's unstable. I wasn't going to hand him that narrative. I'm a mechanic. Diagnosing hidden problems is literally my job. You don't rip an engine apart without understanding what's wrong. You test, you observe, you verify. So I applied the same logic to my marriage. I watched, I listened, I waited. And quietly, without saying a word, I began preparing myself for the truth I already knew was coming. The moment everything tipped from suspicion into certainty didn't arrive with fireworks or screaming. It came quietly, through paper, pixels, and a single careless mistake. I became methodical. Not obsessive, not frantic, just precise. At night, after closing the shop, I sat at the small desk in the garage with a cup of cold coffee and went through our credit card statements line by line. I told myself I was just organizing expenses. In reality, I was learning how to read the map of my own betrayal. Patterns emerged quickly. Tuesday dinners, weekend hotel stays, jewelry purchases spaced just far enough apart to avoid suspicion. The receipts were bad enough, but what finally shattered the illusion was the iPad. Jason and I shared it, originally for grocery lists, utility bills, and syncing calendars. One night, while I was checking emails, a notification slid across the screen. Subject: can't wait for tomorrow night. It was from Brandon Henderson. My hands went cold as I opened it. The email wasn't subtle. It wasn't apologetic. It wasn't careful. It was intimate. Can you bring that black dress again? I can't stop thinking about how you looked in it last week. The waiter asked if we were celebrating something. I almost told him yes, celebrating the fact that you exist. I just said it was our anniversary. He brought us champagne. We should go back. There were more paragraphs. Pet names, inside jokes, plans, dates, hotel names, all written casually, confidently, by a man who had no fear of being discovered because he didn't think I mattered. Because he thought I was too busy with engines and invoices to notice my marriage being dismantled in secret. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, my chest tight, my breath shallow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took screenshots. Every single one. I saved them to a private cloud drive Jason had no access to. Then I printed them, hard copies, and locked them in a drawer at work beside my torque wrenches. I created a spreadsheet. Dates, locations, amounts, messages. Green for confirmed lies. Yellow for suspicious behavior. Red for undeniable proof. By the third week, the sheet looked like a crime scene. And still, I said nothing. Because timing, like engine timing, is everything. You don't fire before the system is primed. So I kept playing my role. I cooked dinner, asked about his day, smiled through lies that now sounded rehearsed and lazy. While he talked, I calculated how much of our joint savings I could legally move, what my options were, how to exit cleanly without detonating everything at once. Then came Thursday. I was in the garage, arms deep inside a Honda engine, when my phone buzzed. Working late again, dinner with a client, don't wait up. I already knew where he was. I already knew who he was with. I could probably guess what he was ordering based on past receipts. So I sent the message. Hope the lobster's good. Tell Brandon to double-check his investment portfolio. I didn't even know if Brandon owned stocks, but it sounded ominous, just threatening enough. 3 seconds later, my phone rang. Not a text. A call. The kind people make when panic overrides strategy. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Hey, I said lightly. Jason's voice was tight. What does that mean? In the background, I heard it. A man's voice. Brandon. What did she say? He asked, sharp and urgent. I smiled for the first time in months. "Just checking in," I said calmly. "Hope you're enjoying dinner. You know how I worry. And if Brandon's there, tell him I hope he's keeping his portfolio diversified. Markets are volatile." Silence. Then the click. The call ended abruptly. No explanation, no cover story. I stood there in my grease-stained garage and laughed. A real laugh. Loud, cathartic. Because in that moment, I understood something clearly. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I was married to a man who thought I was too dull, too distracted, too invisible to notice his betrayal. He was wrong. Very wrong. After that call, something inside me went quiet. Not calm, clear. The kind of clarity that arrives after you've exhausted every excuse, every benefit of the doubt, every version of denial that lets you sleep at night. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't spiraling. I felt resolved. Jason didn't come home until nearly midnight. I heard his key in the door, the careful way he closed it, the pause, like he was listening for my breathing, trying to gauge whether I was awake. He smelled like cologne and anxiety. "Hey," he said softly, stepping into the kitchen. I looked up from the counter where I was drying a mug. "Hey, long dinner?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, client wanted to go over projections. It ran late." I didn't argue. I didn't press. I just nodded and asked, "You want me to save you some food?" Relief flickered across his face. "That'd be great." That was the moment I understood the power of silence. When people expect confrontation and don't get it, they unravel on their own. That night, lying in bed beside him, listening to his breathing slow, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the questions I'd been avoiding for months. When did I start feeling lonely in my own marriage? How long had I been performing instead of living? What parts of myself did I shrink to make this work? I didn't blame myself for his affair, but I did take responsibility for staying when I knew something was wrong. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Chun. She looked at my folder, screenshots, receipts, emails, and let out a low whistle. "Oh, honey," she said, equal parts sympathy and professional interest. "This is thorough." Documentation, she explained, was everything. And I had more than enough. Jennifer walked me through the rules. What I could move, what I couldn't, what had to be done slowly, carefully, legally. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protection. So I began untangling my life quietly. I transferred my half of our joint accounts, plus what Jason had spent on hotel rooms, jewelry, and business dinners. I changed passwords, moved utilities into my name. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just prepared. Meanwhile, Jason relaxed. Every compliment I gave him loosened him further. Every dinner I cooked, every kiss I placed on his cheek before bed, convinced him he was getting away with it. Comfort makes people sloppy. That's how I discovered the next business trip. It popped up on the shared iPad while I was checking the grocery list. Phoenix Conference, Friday to Sunday, Fairmont, Scottsdale. I laughed out loud. 5-star resort, spa, golf, romantic desert views. Definitely not a PowerPoint convention. That night, Jason mentioned it casually. "I have to go to Phoenix next weekend. Mandatory attendance. Boring stuff." I squeezed his hand. "That's tough. But Phoenix is beautiful. Try to enjoy it between sessions. Maybe get a spa treatment." The relief in his eyes was almost comical. "You're the best," he said. "Some guys would get upset." "I understand a lot of things," I replied. And I did. After he went upstairs to pack 5 days early, I booked a flight. Same airline, same flight, same destination. Different name. Friday to Sunday. I packed my camera, the one with the zoom lens. I packed patience. I packed certainty. The morning he left, I drove him to the airport, kissed him goodbye, and watched him walk away smiling, completely unaware his double life was about to collapse under professional-grade evidence. As I drove home, one thought repeated in my mind. Game on. There is something deeply unsettling about following your own husband to meet the woman he thinks he loves more than you. I boarded the plane last, baseball cap low, sunglasses on, even though it made me look ridiculous. Jason was 4 rows ahead, window seat. I recognized the tilt of his head immediately, the posture he only used when texting someone he cared about. I didn't need to see the screen. I already knew who it was. The man beside me struck up small talk. Business or pleasure? I smiled thinly. A little of both. He laughed. Sales conference. My wife thinks I'm cheating because I travel so much. The irony almost made me choke on my ginger ale. Yeah, I said. People who cheat on business trips usually deserve whatever's coming to them. He nodded, completely unaware he'd just narrated my life. Phoenix was blazing when we landed. I waited. Let Jason walk ahead. Let the distance stay safe. Phoenix Sky Harbor was crowded, perfect for disappearing in plain sight. Then I saw him. Brandon Henderson. Taller than I expected. Gym fit. Polished. The kind of man who looks successful without ever appearing tired. He stood by baggage claim scanning the crowd, and the moment Jason appeared, his face lit up. Jason didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, heels clicking, and Brandon lifted him into a hug that ended in a kiss so intimate, strangers looked away. The kind of kiss I hadn't received in years. My hands shook as I raised my phone. Click, click, click. I documented everything. The embrace, the kiss, their hands intertwined. The way Jason leaned into him like he belonged there. They walked toward the parking garage holding hands. I followed. Brandon opened the door of a rented Mercedes. I noted the plate. I climbed into my modest rental sedan and stayed 2 cars back. The Fairmont was exactly what you'd expect. Palms, fountains, valet smiles that cost more than my car payment. I parked in the visitor lot and watched as they checked in together. I zoomed in. Mr. and Mrs. Harris. A fake name, a fake marriage, a real betrayal. I took 47 photos. 47 clear, indisputable pieces of evidence. I sat in my car afterwards, scrolling through them, waiting to feel something explosive. Rage, grief, triumph. What I felt instead was quiet finality. This was over. I opened a new message. To Amanda Henderson. I attached all 47 photos. No caption. I hit send. The next morning, I sat at a cafe across from the Fairmont, nursing coffee and watching the entrance like a stakeout. Around 9, my phone buzzed. He's calling nonstop. I'm not answering. How are you holding up? I replied with a thumbs up. Then I saw Jason. He stormed out of the hotel, phone pressed to his ear, pacing, face unraveling in real time. Panic didn't suit him. He looked small. 2 minutes later, he walked straight into the cafe. Our eyes met. He froze. Nicole, what are you doing here? I took a slow sip of coffee. Trying the Lobster, heard great things. Color drained from his face. His phone buzzed again. He looked down, and whatever Amanda sent him finished the job. What did you do? He whispered. Nicole, what did you do? I smiled. Nothing dramatic. I just communicated. You always said communication was key. He collapsed into the chair across from me. You followed me, he said. That's insane. Gathering evidence, I corrected. Confirming my husband is a liar, spending our money on hotel rooms with his coworker. Tears filled his eyes. I was going to tell you. When? After checking out under a fake last name? He reached for my hand, then pulled back. We can fix this. Therapy. People recover from affairs. We can get divorced, I said, sliding an envelope across the table. His hands shook as he opened it. Divorce papers. Signed. By both of us. When did I... He stopped. The tax forms. You signed them in June. That's illegal. I played the voice memo. His voice, cheerful, distracted. Whatever you need me to sign, babe. Jennifer had been very clear. Always read before you sign. He looked sick. The house? He asked quietly. In my name. Always was. The accounts? Split, minus your extracurricular spending. His phone rang again. Brandon. I nodded toward it. You should answer. Oh, and Amanda already contacted HR. Those expense reports, turns out they weren't approved. He stared at me like I was a stranger. You planned this. No, I said calmly. You did. I just documented it. He left the cafe shaking. I stayed, finished breakfast, ordered another coffee. I wasn't victorious. I was free. The flight home was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. I sat by the window, watching the desert fade into clouds, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. I expected relief. I expected satisfaction. What I felt instead was something heavier, an exhaustion that settled into my bones like I'd been carrying a weight I'd only just put down. When I unlocked the front door of the house, the silence hit harder than I anticipated. No TV murmuring in the background, no distracted greetings, no phone vibrating on the counter with lies disguised as work, just stillness. I dropped my bag by the door and stood there for a long moment, staring at the space Jason used to occupy. The couch where he'd slept during our worst months. The spot at the table where his coffee mug always left a ring I used to complain about. I sat down and cried. Not loud, not dramatic. The kind of crying that happens when you finally stop holding yourself together. I cried for the version of us I believed in. For the woman I used to be, patient, hopeful, convinced love could outwork dishonesty. I cried because even though I'd done everything right at the end, I still felt like I'd failed at the beginning. The next days blurred together. I changed the locks. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I boxed up his clothes neatly, folded them the way I always had. Muscle memory doesn't disappear just because love does. Friends called. Some awkward, some supportive, some fishing for details. I told them the truth, but gently. I wasn't interested in dragging his name through every conversation. I was too tired for that. At night, the house felt too big. I slept with the lights on the first few evenings. The bed felt wrong, too wide, too empty. I found myself waking up, reaching for someone who wasn't there, then remembering all over again why. Jason called once. I let it ring. He left a voicemail, crying, apologizing, promising everything he'd promised before. I deleted it. Not because it didn't hurt, because it hurt too much. I questioned myself in those quiet hours. Did I push him away? Did I miss something important? Was I too focused on my business? Too independent? Too steady? Then I remembered the photos, the fake last name, the spreadsheets of lies, and the guilt loosened its grip. Healing isn't linear. Some mornings I felt light, capable of anything. Other days I couldn't bring myself to cook dinner and ate cereal straight from the box, sitting on the kitchen floor. But somewhere in that darkness, something shifted. I realized I wasn't broken. I was grieving. Not just the marriage, but the illusion that loyalty alone guarantees safety. The moment that changed everything came quietly. I was standing in the garage late one night, closing up the shop after a long day, when I noticed how peaceful it felt. No waiting, no wondering where someone was, no second guessing. Just me, my work, my life. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply, and it didn't hurt. I wasn't at rock bottom because of Jason's betrayal. I was there because I was finally letting go, and that meant there was nowhere left to go but forward. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was balancing invoices at the front desk of the shop. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Nicole?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. Calm, steady, not emotional. "This is Amanda Henderson." I stepped into the office and closed the door. She didn't waste time. "I wanted you to hear it from me, not through the rumor mill," she said. "Brandon was terminated yesterday. HR found discrepancies in his expense reports. Hotels, dinners, gifts. He tried to explain. It didn't go well." I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed. "I'm sorry," she added quickly. "I know that probably doesn't make this easier." "It does," I said honestly. "Thank you for telling me." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "He's been calling, crying, saying he made a mistake." "They all do," I replied softly. Amanda laughed, not happy, not bitter, just relieved. "I filed yesterday, divorce. I should have done it years ago. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the wall. It wasn't victory I felt. It was release. Later that week, Jennifer called. "Your paperwork is finalized," she said. "You're officially divorced." I expected fireworks, closure, some dramatic sense of completion. Instead, I felt grounded. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky in burnt orange and pink. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something I had to brace myself against. I didn't rush into anything. I focused on the shop, expanded hours, hired another mechanic. I slept better, ate better, laughed more. Real laughter, not polite participation. One evening after work, I stopped at a small cafe near the shop. Somewhere I'd passed 100 times but never entered. That's where I met Luke. He was the waiter with a crooked smile and tired eyes that held humor instead of bitterness. He poured my coffee and said, "You look like someone who needs pancakes." I laughed. Harder than I expected. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just showed up with warmth and normalcy. We talked about nothing important, weather, bad music, burnt toast, and for the first time since everything collapsed, I felt human again. Jason called once more, crying, saying Brandon had dumped him, saying he'd ruined everything, asking if we could talk. I told him, calmly, "You always wanted something minimalist. Consider this a clean slate." He didn't call again. That was the moment I realized something important. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from clarity, from choosing peace over explanation, from knowing your worth doesn't depend on who failed to see it. The aftermath didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, phone calls, half-heard conversations, awkward silences where people didn't know which side of the story they were allowed to believe. Jason's world unraveled faster than he expected. His company distanced itself immediately. Not publicly, quietly. The kind of professional exile that's worse than being fired outright. Projects reassigned, meetings canceled. His name stopped appearing in group emails. Brandon's termination had triggered a closer look at the entire department. Once HR starts pulling threads, secrets don't stay buried long. Friends who once praised Jason's ambition began avoiding him. Invitations dried up. Dinners turned into excuses. Loyalty is fragile when it's built on convenience. His parents called me. His mother cried, apologized, said she never thought Jason would do something like this. I listened politely. "I'm sorry," she said. "Is there anything we can do?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "No," I said, "but thank you for asking." I wasn't angry with them. I just wasn't responsible for carrying their guilt. Jason tried again. One final attempt. He showed up at the shop unannounced, standing awkwardly near the entrance like he didn't know how to exist in my space anymore. "I lost everything," he said. "You don't understand." I looked at him, really looked. The confidence was gone, the polish, the entitlement. He looked like someone who'd confused desire with entitlement and paid the price. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." He asked about the house. I told him it was sold. That wasn't entirely true yet, but it would be. I'd already started planning my next move, downsizing, simplifying, turning the page. He asked if I hated him. I thought about it. "No," I said honestly. "I just don't trust you. And without trust, love doesn't survive." That ended the conversation. Amanda texted me later that week. Brandon moved into a short-term rental. He keeps telling mutual friends he made one mistake. I smiled at the phrasing. One mistake. 47 photos. Dozens of receipts. Months of lies. Mistakes are accidents. Betrayal is a pattern. The divorce finalized quietly. No courtroom drama, no screaming matches, just paperwork and signatures. Jennifer was right. Documentation speaks louder than emotion ever could. Life settled into something gentler. I rearranged the furniture, repainted the bedroom, donated clothes I'd been holding on to for reasons I no longer remembered. Luke and I became friends. Then something more, slowly, carefully. No grand gestures, just consistency, respect, laughter. He never asked about Jason. I never volunteered, because the past didn't deserve the spotlight anymore. One evening, as I locked up the shop, I caught my reflection in the glass. I looked different. Not younger, stronger, more myself. I realized something important then. Jason didn't lose me when I caught him cheating. He lost me the moment he decided I was too busy, too ordinary, too invisible to notice. And that assumption cost him everything. A month later, the house felt different, not empty, peaceful. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo with absence, but with possibility. Somewhere between changing the locks and realizing I could eat cereal for dinner without anyone commenting on it, I reclaimed pieces of myself I hadn't noticed were missing. Mornings became mine again. I woke up without that familiar knot in my chest, the one that comes from wondering where someone is, who they're texting, what version of the truth I'd get that day. I drank my coffee slowly on the porch, watching the sun rise, not rushing to perform the role of a wife who was trying to hold something together that no longer wanted to exist. Jason called once more, crying. He told me Brandon had left him, that he was moving into a studio apartment, that everything had fallen apart. I listened quietly. Then I said, "You always wanted something minimalist." He didn't laugh. I did. People ask me now what happened to my marriage. I tell them my husband diversified his portfolio, emotionally and physically, and forgot that risk always comes with consequences. What I learned isn't dramatic. It isn't about revenge or winning. It's about clarity, about understanding that love without honesty isn't love. It's convenience. That trust isn't something you beg for or monitor. It's something that exists naturally or not at all. I learned that patience doesn't mean self-erasure, and strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated, unapologetic. Sometimes karma doesn't strike like lightning. Sometimes it just needs Wi-Fi, documentation, patience, and a good lawyer named Jennifer. Sometimes it arrives disguised as peace. As I sit on my porch now, the sky painted in gold and violet, I realize I didn't lose a husband. I gained my life back. And that, more than anything, is the ending I deserved.